In this video, I'll show you how I paint Minotaurs Space Marines. Hi everyone, and welcome to another brushstroke painting guide, where this time I'm going to take you through the steps I took for painting this Minotaurs Space Marine Captain. Full disclosure at this point, I'm not a gamer, I'm just a painter, so I'm not actually sure even if this figure is allowable in the game. It's just a kit bash that I made and then decided that the Minotaurs paint scheme would be a good one to fit the aesthetic. It's also a paint guide that people have been asking for, so I really hope you find this useful. Speaking of the kit bash, I'm sure there's a few of you who will be very interested in knowing what miniatures actually went into making this figure. So the core figure itself is the Imperial Fists character Tor Garridan, and then I combined that with the helmet visor and the hood from Primaris Inceptor. It's worth mentioning that you do need to have that armoured hood piece to extend the back of the armour, otherwise if you just took the visor on its own then there'll be a gap at the top and it just won't look right. To help you guys out, I'll list everything that I've used in the kit bash in the description below, along with all the paints that I'm going to use in the tutorial, and I'll add links to where you can buy those at discount prices. There's also a paint bundle provided by Element Games, which will allow you to buy all the paints you're going to need for the Minotaurs scheme in a single click, and by buying that bundle you're also helping support this channel, so that would be great if you could check that out. One last thing quickly before I start the paint guide, I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's subscribed to the channel so far. I really do appreciate your support. If you happen to be watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, then please do hit that subscribe button now, and don't forget the notification bell so that you'll be told whenever I post another video. Right, moving on to painting then, and as you can see I've already primed and prepared my miniature for painting, and I'll be painting this model as sub-assemblies. If you'd like to know more details in terms of how I prepare my models for painting, what primers I use and why I do things as sub-assemblies, then please do check out this link above, which will take you step by step through the process. And the first step for painting this Minotaurs captain is going to be base coating all of its armour with some bronze from Darkstar Miniatures. Nice and easy step to start off with. You don't have to be neat or worry about any of the details at this stage. The only thing you need to concentrate on is getting a nice clean and smooth finish over all of the armour. For this I've added a touch of water, and I'll actually be adding 2 coats so that I get a nice solid finish. So just work your way around the model and work that paint into all those deep recesses and around all those details, making sure that you don't leave any gaps. For those of you who are lucky enough to have an airbrush, then I'd definitely recommend that you use it for this step, not because it gives a smoother finish particularly, just because it would speed up the whole process. For the next step we're going to start basing in some of the other details, and the first one is going to be all the armour joints and the inside of his cape, and for this I'm going to use some Eshin Grey from Games Workshop. Right then, so I've added a touch of water to the Eshin Grey just to help it flow nice and smoothly, and I'm just going to work around the model and pick out all of these armour joints. Now ideally it would be best if you were as neat as possible, but some of these areas are quite difficult to access with your brush, so don't worry if you do spill over onto some of the armour, just let it all dry and then neaten it back up again with some bronze. For painting the cloak, you want to be painting in the direction of the folds so that your brush follows those folds and applies a nice clean and smooth finish. Apologies for the continuity error here. You're not going mad, the shoulder pad has been painted in at this step, but that's only because I painted this piece out of sequence, so apologies for that. But we'll be coming on to those colours very soon, so it'll all make sense. Moving on now to the next step, which is going to be painting in all of the red armour panels and the outside of the cloak, and for this I'm going to use deep red from scale 75. So just as we did before, add a touch of water to help the paint flow nice and smoothly, and you want to try and be as neat as possible, but if you do make any mistakes then let it dry fully and correct it again with some bronze. You'll need to apply several coats of this to build up to a solid finish. So one of the great things about Scale 75 paints is that they dry very, very matte, and I'm using that to our advantage to add a bit more contrast on the model so that it contrasts against the shining metal of the bronze armour and adds that little bit more interest to what would otherwise be quite a plain looking colour scheme. I'm also resisting the temptation to add too much red to the model because I don't want it to end up looking too much like Iron Man. Again, when it comes to painting the cloak, you want to be following those folds in the cloak so that you get a nice clean and smooth finish without any brush marks. For the next step, I'm going to work on just the cloak, and I'm going to add some highlights now using some blood red from Scale 75. For this step, I've added a little bit more water than normal just so that you can see some of the base colour through it when it's applied, and I'm going to apply it to all of the raised areas on the cloak, leaving all of the deeper recesses untouched. Adding this highlight now will actually add more contrast and depth when we come to apply this shade to the cloak later. Moving back to base coating in details now, and I'm going to pick out everything that I want to be in silver. So this includes things on the power fist here, these chunky cables and the shoulder weapon, and for this I'm going to use graphite from Dark Star Miniatures. Just as we did with the bronze armour, I've added a touch of water to make the paint flow nice and smooth, and I'm trying to be as neat as possible, but if I do make any mistakes I'll just let that dry and tidy that back up again with a touch of bronze. By adding that touch of water to the paint, it really helps it get into all of these grooves and also gives a nice clean, smooth finish when it dries. Having painted in these cables in silver, I'm thinking that I really want to make a stronger definition between these sections, so I'm actually going to darken down these recesses, and I'm also going to paint in the casing of this gun with some steel from Dark Star Miniatures. By keeping my paint nice and thin, I can just run it into these grooves, and that will really strengthen that definition between the sections. Likewise, adding a darker metal casing to the gun should give a bit more interest and detail. It should also contrast nicely for the sort of plasma glow that we're going to add later. Okay, so this is actually applied a bit too thin, so I will just need to let this dry and apply a second coat to make sure that I do get a solid finish. With that done, I'm going to paint in the leather details now. There's not too many on this model, it's mainly just this strap across the front and a belt around its waist, and for this I'm going to use Doom Bull Brown from Games Workshop. Okay, I think that's enough detail painted in now for us to be able to apply our first wash, and this is going to be to all of the bronze armour and that brown leather that we've just painted, and for this I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade from Games Workshop. So this step is pretty straightforward. You just want to take your wash and apply it over all of the bronze and brown areas. You do need to take care though, because we don't want to get it on any of the silver, Eshen grey or red details, but you do want to work it around and encourage it to settle into all of those deep recesses and details. If you do make a mistake and you happen to get it onto an area that you didn't want it to, then just make sure that you let it dry fully and then just paint over with the colour that you need. So with that Agrax wash now fully dry, I'm going to apply a wash now to all of the red areas of the armour and the outside of the cloak, and for this I'm going to use red tone from the Army Painter. I'm just taking a little bit of care just to make sure that I don't get any of the wash onto the bronze areas, but I'm also making sure that it applies evenly and smoothly to avoid any ugly watermarks when it dries. Speaking of which, do make sure that you let this wash fully dry before moving on to the next step. When applying the wash to the cloak, I can afford to be a bit more generous, but I need to be quite quick in terms of how I apply it, because I don't want it to start drying in one area and then me accidentally moving it with my brush. So I'm starting at the top and I'm applying it into all of these recesses so that it really darkens down and adds some real depth. With that wash fully dry, I'm going to apply a third wash now to all of the silver and Eshin grey areas, and for this I'm going to use Null Oil from Games Workshop. Just taking my time really on this step and making sure that I apply the wash just to all of these recesses for the silver and Eshin grey areas, and making sure that I avoid it on any of the other parts of the model that we've already shaded. As you can see, those washes have really added some depth and shadow to our model, but it has darkened down the whole thing a little bit too much, so now I'm going to brighten back up the armour, starting with a layer of bronze from Darkstar Miniatures. Okay, so the idea for this step is to leave the shade in those recesses and creases, and then paint bronze back in on the armour panels to brighten them back up. So it's just a case of leaving a little bit at the top of this panel, and then I can paint in all the rest with the bronze. And then moving on to the next one, again, just leave a little bit at the top and paint in the rest of the panel. And now I'm going to work my way around the rest of the model, repeating the process. Next, we'll brighten the armour a bit more by adding another layer of antique gold from Darkstar Miniatures. This time I'm not only leaving the recessed areas, but also a small patch of the bronze showing from underneath, and then I paint in the rest of the panel with the antiques gold. This time I'm going to be focusing mainly on the areas at the uppermost part of the model, which are catching most of the light, and that way you can add a real highlight and bring some depth into the model. So this paint from Darkstar is actually really nice because it's a little bit translucent, and if you thin it with a touch of water you can actually apply multiple layers to build up some really nice soft transitions. Okay, so the bronze armour is now looking really nice and bright, and now just to finish it off I'm going to add a final edge highlight using some white gold from Pro Acryl. This step is one of those steps where you really want to just take your time and be as careful as possible. You want to pick out all of those raised areas and sharp edges which will be catching most of the light. If you'd like to get some more tips and tricks in terms of improving your edge highlighting, then please do check out my highlighting video by clicking this link above. Next, I'm just going to paint in some of the details I missed, such as this rope and the purity seal, and for this I'm going to use some Mephiston red from Games Workshop. As always, just add a touch of water to help that paint flow nice and smoothly, and then just take your time and pick out the details. Next, I'm going to paint in the parchment with some Ushabti bone from Games Workshop. You may find that the coverage of this paint over a metallic isn't too great, so apply several coats until you get to a solid finish. Now apply a wash of Agrax Earthshade to both the rope and the purity seal, and allow it to fully dry before moving to the next stage, which is going to be highlighting all of the red parts of the armour and the cloak, and for this I'm going to use Blood Red from Scale 75. Just as with the bronze armour, really take your time with this step and try and be as neat and careful as possible. If you do make any mistakes, then just go back and neaten things back up again with the colour underneath. On these cloak folds there's actually a really nice sharp edge, which is great, so I can run my highlight along those, and then I can just pick out any extra areas I feel the light would catch most. Just a few remaining details to paint in now, such as these other cables. Now, it's obviously up to you what colour you paint these, but I've gone for a really striking blue from Pro Acryl. And while they're drying, I might as well make a start on painting the instrument panel and the lenses on the model, and for this I'm going to base coat with some chrome from Vallejo. This is actually just a quick and lazy way really of painting lights and lenses. Ordinarily you'd want to paint them with highlights and shadows and nice blends, but by painting them with a chrome or a metallic underneath and then doing a coloured glaze, you can get a good tabletop effect. And now I'll just glaze over that chrome with a thinned down Calf Blue Clear with some Lamia Medium. So this first layer is very thinned down, and this is just so that I can give a bit of a soft object light sourcing effect by covering pretty much most of the panel. And then for the next couple of layers I'm going to come back in with a stronger mixture and then intensify the colour on those lights and dials. So as a final finishing touch just to those blue pipes, I'm going to add a bit of depth to them by adding a shade, and for this I'm going to use Blue Tone from the Army Painter. And all that remains now is to assemble my model and add it to its base, and my Minotaurs captain is complete. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, then please do click that like button and drop a comment below. If you'd like to see more of these videos, then please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to be told whenever I post another video. So thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.